Hello and welcome y'all back to the Morbid Moonlight 31 Days of Halloween, where it is my pleasure to take you on a trip through the wonderfully strange filmography of genre icon and all-round legend Felissa Rose, film a day, every day for the month of October. Today, we're going to be looking at a film that goes by the name of Big Freaking Rat. What this is it's this kind of throwback giant mutated killer rat film about a small town being menaced by a perversion of science that I'm guessing is meant to evoke your kind of classic 50s American sci-fi films of the past. But somewhere along the line, it's gotten itself mixed up with this kind of weird, slightly lame comedy. And the end result is one of those films that I struggle to imagine exactly who it's going to satisfy. Now, it would be easy to slag off a film called Big Freaking Rat because it seems like such an obvious target, just because it seems like the kind of film that is easy to point at and ask just why the fuck stuff like this is getting made. But that's not actually the case. Weirdly, like I said, I kind of get the feeling that there's two things happening at once here. One is the urge to make quite a genuine kind of 50s monster movie with likeable, down-to-earth characters and a sort of quiet, sincere side to it. And the other is to turn everything into a spoofy joke. I've got to say that I think that the title was applied during the let's turn this into a comedy stage of development, because I think that with a less obviously trashy title, BFR could actually have done okay for itself. But I think that a title like that immediately puts off a lot of people, whilst leaving the ones that actually stick around with quite a good idea of what they're getting themselves in for. In fact, it almost programs you to think of the film in a certain way. Honestly though, here's a challenge for you. Name a film, comedy or otherwise, with a great comedy title. A film with a title that you laugh at and think is actually consistently funny. Giving your film a joke title might seem like a good idea at the time, but then you're just fucking stuck with it hanging around your neck, and you've got to try and laugh at it again and again. See, if I was trying to promote a film like Big Freaking Rat, I wouldn't even know where to start, because not only is it a joke title, but it's not even a good joke title. See, the only decent joke title that I can think of is probably, and this is quite an obscure film, but it's Larry Blameyer's The Lost Skeleton Returns Again, because it's funny in a clever, subtle kind of way that fits the film itself. I mean, I love Larry Blameyer's work, The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra, The Trail of the Screaming Forehead, and his stuff. If you don't know who he is, definitely go and check out his stuff because it's well worth a watch. But that's the only example of a good joke title I can think of that's not so jokey and obvious that it actually ruins the film itself. But to be honest, the title isn't where you should be front-loading all of your good comedy material. But moving on, is Big Freaking Rat an apt title? Well, for one thing, the first scene is pure out-and-out trauma territory with this pair of kind of ludicrous goofballs doing that kind of exaggerated bad acting thing. And it's a scene that slops along like a wet fish. It's got comedy music and some absolutely horseshit gags in it. Weirdly, we then flip to a few character scenes that set up this small local community where we get to meet our cast of characters, and everything feels quite nice and genuine, weirdly, and I actually think that in these scenes it's very easy to forget that you're watching a film called Big Freaking Rat, because they're not jokey, they're not comedic or spoofy, but just straightforward characterization. Felissa Rose is a likeable addition to the cast, not the biggest or most important of roles, but she does well with what she's got and she slips into naturally charming mode and does a good job. The problem is that we've got this cast of characters, but then we cut from them to this group of deliberately, ridiculously stereotypical New York gangsters who are played totally for laughs. The cast begins to swell in size, whilst we get the usual kind of slow-building hints of giant killer rat activity, and then, about halfway through, we cut to this group of campers, who are your basic slasher movie fodder, but the film grinds to a complete halt to accommodate this group of nothing characters, and we actually seem to spend quite a decent chunk of the film away from the characters that the opening act has taken the time for us to get to know and like. The whole camp scene just stretches on for what I would guess is probably about 20 minutes, but it's probably closer to about 10, and it's just the kind of thing that should be a 30-second prologue to a scene of randos getting killed by our big freaking rat. It's just a total waste of time. Then about an hour into the film, Dave Sheridan turns up. Now, I really love Dave Sheridan, and he seems to be in a spate of being in every single film that Felissa Rose is in at the moment, and the two of them fit nicely into this kind of a film. To most people, Dave Sheridan will always be known as Doofy from Scary Movie, a part in which he was genuinely actually really quite funny. But the guy is very versatile, and he comes across as this kind of likeable, charismatic character actor that I think David Hasselhoff used to think that he might have been, but realistically never was. Sheridan's got really great comedic timing, but he's also capable of doing legit acting when he needs to. weirdly, I think that the film that really turned things around for him in terms of reshaping his career into one where he can actually get away with playing self-effacing, gently comedic leading men in low-budget stuff was Victor Crowley, where he totally was the best thing in that film. He's not that well used here, but he definitely livens things up compared to some of the duller stuff before it. The main thing is, though, and I don't know if I can even be bothered explaining this, to be honest, but what happens is, when he turns up, we get the film's one big central joke. The comedy New York gangsters are secretly torturing one of their guys who betrayed them, and they're waiting for a hired killer to turn up to snuff him out. Because of the giant rat skulking about, they also think that they've got rat problems, so they hire an exterminator. We then get an extended, farce-like routine about Dave Sheridan's character, the actual rat killer, being mistaken for the guy that's come to exterminate the rat that's betrayed the gangsters, and everything just falls into place. There's a lot of setup for a pretty lame series of puns, to be honest, but at least it's better than listening to some stupid fucker playing the guitar for minutes at a time. I mean, all things considered, I did not by any means hate Big Freaking Rat, because some of it is actually trying, which is nice. Most of the comedy feels legit rather than just kind of that vague spoofiness where nothing really matters, and there is actually some attempts at real characterization, although of course it is on a very basic kind of comic booky level. Some of the characters, such as the cliched, tech-obsessed millennial, can be pretty fucking annoying, to be honest, but there's worse bunches to spend your time with than this lot. The real star of the movie, the Big Freaking Rat himself, is brought to life in the old-fashioned way almost entirely through the use of practical monster effects, which is ambitious for something so obviously low budget as this, and I've got to say that I think it is actually a reasonable effort depending on your tolerance for old school effects. I honestly think it's totally serviceable as an effect, and I've seen big budget CG monsters that I've bought into less than our rat friend here. As somebody who likes older monster films and creature features, I do not mind this kind of stuff at all, and I like the fact that they gave it a shot and stuck with it. It's got quite a fun kind of 90s comic book style opening credit scene that's nice, and I think overall the worst thing about Big Freaking Rat, apart from that fucking desperate title, is that it takes the time to set up this likeable group of characters, then it just buggers off and leaves them for about half an hour, and why was this the case? I don't know, but it really does just scupper the film's momentum. If you're afraid of something painfully spoofy, then apart from that just awful opening scene, this definitely isn't that film. It's a decent enough little B-movie, it's rough around the edges, yeah, but it does have some genuine charm to it. It's nicely filmed, and it's got an eye for likeable characters, even if it does get a little too easily derailed. I think Dave Sheridan is great, even though he only turns up in the last act, and Felissa Rose gets a chance to more or less be herself. I think this one gets a Felissa factor of about maybe 3.5 out of 10, because she's not in it too much, but she does get a nice couple of scenes when she does turn up, and she seems to really mesh well with this group of characters, which helps sell the authenticity of the world that this film is setting up. As for a rating, well, you know what? I like Big Freaking Rat. It's a little bit jokey in places, not necessarily in the ways that you'd expect, and it's good that it takes the time to actually tell its story and invest in its characters, rather than just dump a load of spoofy bullshit on us and expect us to laugh at it. I think I'm going to say 5 out of 10 for Big Freaking Rat, which is probably a little bit more than it deserves, but I stand by it as a pretty entertaining little B-movie that goes easy on the dreaded irony and postmodernism. But I think that should do us for today though, day number 21 of the 31 Days of Felissa Rose. Hope that you've enjoyed hearing my thoughts on Big Freaking Rat, and I shall say ta-ta for now. Please, if you've liked what you've heard, think about subscribing. Let me know why I'm wrong to give this movie 5 out of 10 in the comments, all the rest of it, and we shall see you tomorrow for another Felissa Rose film. And I hope that we'll see you there.